Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio are Professor Bola Akintenwa, Director General, Bolitech Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies; Chike Ogea, former Commissioner for Information, Delta State; and Professor Anthony Kila, International Director of Studies at the European Center of Advanced and Professional Studies. Yemi Adamolekun will join us later. Yemi Adamolekun is Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Well, we have had two guests discussing two major stories of the week. First, the reported GDP growth year-on-year in the second quarter of 2021 by 5.01%, which is a very significant growth in the last, in the last year. And then, of course, the second issue, which is the Nnpc reporting profit after tax of 287 billion, the highest ever recorded in 44 years of the history of the Nnpc. And the federal government has been celebrating these two stories. So we have had two perspectives on these two issues. In a sense, we had issues with Dr. Nweze's audio connection, but I'm sure we were able to get a little from him. Let me start with you, Professor Anthony Kila. What's your take on these two major issues? Is there cause for celebration? Do we have something to look forward to?
Well, I think there's always cause for celebration if the GDP grows. Yes, and if an organization reports profit, there's cause for celebration. But then the devil is in the details, as we've been taught. So the GDP growing is a good thing. You asked if it's not something esoteric. Growth of GDP can be esoteric. There's no doubt about it. But it's a first step to being an accepted growth by everybody. The accepted growth is this growth that everybody feels. You talk about moving from Wall Street to Main Street, moving from the stock exchange to the real life. It becomes a general growth when there is increase in job, when there is availability of products and services, which can maybe lead to falling prices. But more than falling prices, what we want is affordability of product, the effective demand, I would say, in economics, that is backed by supply. Now, the point is this: it's a good thing that the thing is growing. It is possible to have growth without job. Economy by itself does not create job. Growth is measured by production growing. Productivity does not relate to creation of job directly, because there are times where with technology, you start to increase productivity and you reduce job. It is the duty of economic managers to link growth of productivity to creation of job and availability of goods, because you can increase production, but not for the people of the country. You can produce things that is not needed by them, and they will not benefit from it. The other good thing I see there, which a lot of people are not talking about, is that the increase is higher also for the non-oil sector. That is a very good thing. So your question, which you are trying to find out, what should we hope for? What should we be doing? We should try to sustain this. The way to sustain it is to increase our national production, the gross domestic product. We need to produce more and import less. And I must say here, my own idea of producing and consuming what we do more is not by putting tariffs or by banning things. It's by encouraging productivity, encouraging businesses to produce, by giving them what they need, from infrastructure to finance. For the Nnpc thing, profit reported for the first time in 44 years is a big thing. But people have the right to suspect that. Why are they doing so? Is it because they are planning to go private soon, so they're doctoring the book? Is it because they're reaching to other arms of Nnpc and consolidating their accounts? Those who have released this report should have taken into consideration this anticipated reaction, and they'll be dealing with it soon. So when the president said the auditor report should be published, yes, he is right, they should be published as soon as possible. We don't know when, but we can push for when, as people, as organizations, as stakeholders, and, as the media and all the analysts as well.
Well, Chike again.
Well, what will I say? I listened to the petroleum specialist speak, and what immediately came to me was the kind of tactics the old Muhammad Ali used to do when he used to do what he called rope-a-dope, and that was why he always told us at every turn that, he's a loyal citizen. Yeah, we're all loyal citizens, but if there are issues to be examined, we should look at it. For me, I look at it from two major perspectives. One is that, thank God I'm in the aviation industry, so I can tell you something. That aspect of things we talked about, where we said definitely no new jobs were created, the masses were still poor, there was no reinvigoration of the economy in any way that anybody experienced. But all the same, I can assure you that some airlines were even going forward by converting their aircrafts from passenger aircrafts to pure cargo aircrafts. So there was a lot of cargo activity going on even during the lockdown. But the point now is that how is that growth for Nigeria? Because I'm also aware that where we should have benefited from this the most, which really is in the agricultural sector, was a place we had hardly done anything. I mean, something came up in the conference we had last week, because we had a big cargo conference, at the Marriott Hotel last week. And there was this pilot who told us about what happened to him about 20 years ago. He had flown his aircraft, a Nigerian pilot, from the UK or somewhere in Europe into Ghana because he had a lot of cargo. It was a cargo aircraft. And of course, there was supposed to be a lot of return cargo with that cargo. But when he got down to the airport in Accra, he didn't see anything. And then he got a call to say that the produce he's taking back to Europe is still actually in the farm, some how many hours away, because they are going to take it to him fresh, which he is going to just by the next day, that thing will come overnight and it is gone to Europe fresh. And that is why you go to Tesco or all those major supermarkets, you still see all the fruits, whether they are pineapples, bananas, everything is still fresh. Obviously, how can Nigeria as a country, knowing how diverse we are, how can we be able to do things like this? That is part of what we're trying to think about in that conference. Then in the case of Nnpc, of course, people are worried because, like everybody rightly said, Professor Killer just said so now, for 44 years, you say we've never made a profit. And then all of a sudden, we're about to deregulate in this same period of this, in the same period of the pandemic, and you're telling us that Nnpc all of a sudden is so profitable.
Chike, on that note, we need to take a quick break, and then when we return, the conversation will continue. But there are other issues I would like to raise, but after the break, that will happen. Stay with us. It's still Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on the Arise News channel. Professor Bola Akintanewa is still here. Chike Ogia is in the studio. And of course, Professor Anthony Kila. Well, Chike Ogia, before we went on that break, you were still talking about the Nnpc figures.
Yes.
If you may just conclude on your point.
Yes. Basically what I was saying is that in the case of Nnpc, it is surprising to me that all of a sudden, like they said, post-PIB, Nnpc was more or less doing nothing. And all of a sudden, we get PIA, and Nnpc is flying. Flying in the period of this pandemic as well. I would love to know how the output increased. Yes, we had better prices, no doubt. But how much of that went into, crude sales and all of that has put all this profit? And just like everyone is saying, maybe in anticipation of the new situation, Nnpc is aggregating all the other ancillary services, whether it's the LNG, whether it's gas and all of that, which if they tell us that that is what they are doing, then it's a different thing. But let us not imagine and just believe that definitely it's just the Nnpc. But like we keep saying, the devil is in the details. We'll wait for the published report, and that is when, like the analyst said, we can now look at the mathematics of the matter, not necessarily the statistics, and see exactly, what they are saying.
Well, Prof, before I come to you, some other commentators that we've listened to say that there is nothing spectacular about the GDP growth of 5.01% year on year, Q2 2021, because what is being demonstrated is what economists call deep dive base effect. Simply that if you explain it, last year, Q2, there was COVID. There was, shutdown, restriction of movement. And if you look at those sectors where there is a lot of activity and improvement now, transportation, telecom, the service sector, agriculture, those are those same sectors that were affected by the lockdown. And so this is to be expected. But the challenge is, how do you sustain the growth? Because everyone is positive about the need for growth. But the fear, the associated fear, is that, look, by the next quarter, by the end of this year, Nigeria will be in an election mood. So all those recommendations by Austin Nwoeze about what government needs to do to sustain growth, would those things be possible, considering that politicians and policymakers will be busy with politics full time?
I cannot agree more with Peter's side. He's quite correct. Let's begin with Austin Nwoeze. He made a number of points with which I do agree. And so do I also agree with Engineer Bala Zaka on some points. If you take a look at the issue of jobless growth, he talked about he differentiated between mathematics and statistics. I agree with him essentially, because even in mathematics, not going too far to statistics, 1 + 1 ordinarily can always amount to 2. But if you are now looking at 1 + 1 in modern mathematics, it depends on the base system you are using. 1 + 1 may not amount to 2. So one cannot but agree with him there. But you see, in terms of statistics, I think there are 3 operational words we need to look at. And that is growth, inflation, and development. It is not simply about jobless growth. The issue is that we are talking about growth, nominally or otherwise, that does not have the potential to result into development. And we've just been told about the many examples given by the 2 interlocutors. They've told us that, look, Professor Killer mentioned it, and our commissioner also mentioned that if the life is costly, cost of maintenance, cost of living, cost of a sachet of pure water, if it is not affordable, for instance, then the growth does not mean much. And if you ask me the question, what is spectacular about it? Absolutely nothing. Please, growth must have an impact on human development, human survival. It is beautiful to have an increase in your volume of trade, in your foreign exchange earnings. It is beautiful. But the issue is that if the growth does not translate into meaningful living, then I don't know what would be spectacular about that. And when you now come to the issue of Nnpc, profitability, my own concern is just the coincidence, or what we call the accidental factors in system analysis. You see, in the next 6 months, or possibly 1 year's time, when the Nnpc Limited is expected to be operational, I want to believe that these statistical figures are being dished out to prepare the minds of would-be investors in such a way that the Nnpc, as a new darling, as a new beautiful bride to be courted, they are just preparing for that. It is as simple as that. Why? Logically, in 44 years, up till 2018, it has always been loss. We were told that 803 billion loss reduced, and then suddenly it passed through the zero level to now have this type of something. Where is the level at which point you have a balance of account? No, please, you can't 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, then 1, 2, 3, 4. So in this case, as much as I would like to agree with them, because the Kyari, the GMD, has said that they embarked on strict management of the company, especially automation of a system and processes, which enhanced efficiency. So in this case, let me rest my case by saying that the dynamics of the progress they have made, they are there, and if we try to maintain them, at least the progress can be sustainable.
Well, Yemi Adamolekun, I understand you've just joined us. Thank you for joining us. Very quickly, I'm sure you listened to our two guests on the two big stories of the week. In this regard, the GDP growth reported 5.01%, and also Nnpc announcing profit after tax of 287 billion naira, first time in 44 years. Your thoughts?
Thank you. Raining where I am, so apologies in advance if I disappear. Interesting. I mean, as I said, Mr. Mack, if I'm not mistaken, who I love the credentials he gave at the end, that he's a chartered accountant, chartered tax professional, and a petroleum engineer. So when he sees the figures, he'll be in a better position to talk about them so that he's not accused of not being a loyal Nigerian. See, the environment of fear that we've created in this country, we can't even analyze facts without being scared that they will get invited by certain agencies of government. But I mean, the one about the growth, as Mr. Killer said, when something grows, it's a good thing. But as we've seen, people trusted NBS's data when it reflected their reality. So when NBS says that we're in a recession, or they say there's negative, that we're not growing, there's negative growth, if I want to use that word, citizens could relate to that because it was a reflection of their lived reality. But as Professor Akintarewa just said, if you say there's growth, but I'm poorer than I was, cost of food has increased, and you say there's growth, it doesn't align with my lived reality, which is why people don't trust it. And again, as we don't also have a lot of outlets that break down data, so citizens can really understand what it means when you say you have GDP growth. We're not saying that things are better. We're just saying numbers changed from 10 to 12 or 10 to 11. It grew. That's all that is really in sort of a mathematical sense. And I'm not a practicing economist, so I won't go into that side of it. Mr. Killer and our guest provided enough. On Nnpc, for me, I just find it very fascinating. I think again, in a low trust environment that we've built by not only agencies, but government officials that lie for a living, it would make sense when you are saying for the first time in 44 years, you're posting a profit without even Mr. President having to say it. No, first of all, let me start with this. Mr. President doesn't understand what happened in Nnpc because Mr. President doesn't have any economic understanding. We've seen that over and over again. So I'm sure our dear Minister of, not even Mr. President, our dear Minister of Petroleum Resources, who also happens to be our president, has no clue, not only with what Nnpc is doing, but with the numbers Nnpc has presented to it. And I find it interesting that he has to say that they should make the audited statements accountable. Under Mr. Kyari, it is commendable that their 2019 audited statements were made public for the first time in that same time period. So I wonder, is it that Nnpc wasn't really losing money before, but now we're now really, which is the other side of it, we're now really seeing the true state of Nnpc? Or the fact that they have been losing money for 44 years and we're now doing some magic with our books. And I think it's also significant, even given the fact that the way Nnpc talks about subsidy, I think the phrase they started using a few years ago was under recovery, because technically subsidy was not in the budget. So for an agency that has had a very rich history of using interesting words, of not having open books, to suddenly go for, I think, from an 800 billion loss to 1 billion and now suddenly posting a profit, it really goes without saying that it will not be believed. But hey, let's wait for the audited statements and I'm sure we can have a whole 1 hour show reviewing the audited statements of the Nnpc.
I hope we have enough auditors and accountants in-house here to be able to do that. But don't worry, we have a very experienced accountant in-house. He's an expert. But let's move on to the next topic. The Afaka campus of the Nigerian Defense Academy in Kaduna, northern Nigeria, was attacked last Tuesday by gunmen described as bandits, even as some people insist the attackers were terrorists. The gunmen abducted and killed military personnel during that invasion. Until now, there is no official statement whether the attackers have been arrested or not. Few days after the attack, news came that another set of bandits who 3 months ago abducted some pupils from their school in the northern state of Niger had released the students. Sadly, one of the children never returned. He died in captivity. The state of insecurity in the land seems to have gotten out of hands. Well, I mean, this is the situation that we have seen. On August 27, students of the Islamiyah school, that's the Tanku Islamiyah school in Tegina in Niger State, were released, all 136 of them or so. And some of the students who were told died in captivity. And then, of course, they have been reunited with their parents. Since December 2020, about 1,000 Nigerian students at various levels have been abducted. And also, 3 days ago, I think, before the release of the Tegina students on August 21, students of the Bethel Baptist High School were also released. 15 of them. 2 days ago, about an additional 32 were released, but out of the total number of students, 90 have been released from the Baptist Bethel School. About 35 are still in captivity. In both cases, we're told that no ransom was paid. Even if, in the case of the Bethel Baptist Secondary School, the abductors had insisted on collecting 1 million naira per child, but nobody has confirmed that ransom has been paid. But the other issue, apart from the release of these two categories of students, is that of the Nigerian Defense Academy. The incident which occurred on Tuesday last week, having resulting in the death of 2 soldiers. One was wounded, and another one, Major Datong, was abducted. And up to now, what we hear is that the military headquarters has put processes in place. The Chief of Defense Staff himself has visited immediately. He visited immediately on Wednesday to say that what has happened to Nigeria's elite military institution is unacceptable. He has also set up a panel of inquiry to find out what happened, how the security of that particular formation could have been compromised. We are also told that a search and rescue team has been put in place to see how Major Datong, who is still allegedly in the custody of the abductors, the kidnappers, can be rescued. But the big concern to Nigerians is if it is possible to compromise the security, the integrity of the Nigerian Defense Academy, a school that is just a few meters away from the School of Forestry Mechanization, which was also attacked earlier this year on the way to the Kaduna International Airport. Does it mean that the authorities have failed to protect that axis? I've also seen another report saying that in Kaduna alone, you have about 6 military formations, including the Kotoko Barracks, also known as New Barracks, including the headquarters of the 1st Mechanized Division, including a naval air base. And are these formations, are they also secure? Or we are going to have a situation whereby bandits have become so audacious, their effrontery has become so elephantine in size that they could attack military formations and perhaps one day summon the courage to even show greater audacity. What do we do? Let me start with you, Yemi.
I think it's important to put in context that according to SPM intelligence, this is the 4th security breach of the NDA in the last 3 years, including an incident in late 2019 where up to 150 cows were rustled from the grounds of the NDA. And as you also pointed out, that NDA is also not far from the College of Forestry Mechanization. We're not serious, Dr. Abati. I don't know what else to say beyond the fact that we're not serious. Because if, as you said, our elite defense institution has a breach of security, whatever message the terrorists are trying to send, they sent it and they sent it very loudly. And I dare say the only reason why this is a major issue is because one official was killed and another is missing. Because if they carried cows, we all move on because cows are cows. People just don't really pay attention. Or if they tried to have an incident but nobody died and nobody was kidnapped, we will not think much of it. But we're now talking about it, the 4th incident in 3 years, or what was that? Yeah, 4th incident in 3 years in our elite academy. And now we're talking about it and it's making the news rounds. We're not serious about fighting insecurity. In this last 1 week, and you've talked about the kidnappings as well. 7 years ago when the Chibok girls were kidnapped, it made the whole world stop. From the Bring Back Our Girls campaign to Michelle Obama carrying a placard in the US, everybody was talking about the Chibok girls. Fast forward 7 years, in this year alone, multiples of the Chibok girls have been kidnapped. And everybody just moves on. It's become, it is what it is. Because as a country, we are becoming more and more numb to people dying and people going missing as our government continues to be more irresponsible in accounting for the lives of its citizens. So when we're serious, the narrative will change.
Well, Chike, what do you think?
Well, I think I could start mine with a question. And the question would be simple. When the former president told us that Boko Haram had infiltrated his government, were we ever told whether they were routed or not from the government? Because I don't know why we are all, showing this very, very fake kind of surprise, if you ask me. Because if Boko Haram was in the government pre-2015, and we are talking about 2021, and nobody has told you that Boko Haram has been gotten out of the government, why are we surprised that Boko Haram would tell its people outside, that's the ones inside, when to attack the NDA, when the sentry are not on duty, when it is when it's most vulnerable for such attacks? Whether you like it, if the NDA can be in the most security, highest levels of security zones in Nigeria, and it could be anywhere. But more importantly, I think we have to get serious in Nigeria. And I think the first point we have to understand is that I'm calling out the leadership of the North in particular here. You see, the North, maybe because of the culture and everything, over the years, has over-pauperized its citizens. And this is what we're saying. Yes, I'm not trying to say there's any different from our boys in the creeks when they get upset and they start blowing up installations, or people, kidnappers in the Southwest or wherever. You will always have that. But I think as a culture, the downtrodden has never really been put in the picture in the North. And if we do not sort out the problem of the North, security-wise, we are not doing anything in Nigeria. We are not going anywhere in Nigeria with security. We can sit down in Lagos and put our heads in the sand, and behave like ostriches and feel we are all hunky-dory, safe here in the South, but we are wasting our time. Because before you know what's happening, these kind of signals we are getting, where elite institutions like the NDA, where secondary students are being taken the way they are taken, randomly, audaciously. We even have people going out and telling us they've gone into the bush, they've spoken to these people. You see, we are not dealing with just some kind of random violence or kidnapping here. What is going on in the North is a planned, orchestrated attack within the echelons of the outside and what is going in the forest. So I think it is important that there must be a concerted action by the government. The government must wake up and do something. Otherwise, the general perception is that the government is not interested in doing anything about the insecurity in the North and, by extension, in Nigeria.
Well, Professor Akintenwa, maybe you will comment also on these children who have been released in batches, and some of whom have been reunited with their parents, and some who have also died. Well, they all fall into the same category because the NDA is also about education in Nigeria. It's a military university. So we've seen either from kindergarten to an Islamic seminary for Islamic education or to a secondary school, nobody seems to be safe.
What we are all discussing centers around seriousness and non-seriousness, which Yemi has articulated and corroborated by Shike. So this footnote is this. At the level of the Islamia pupils, the question that I would like to raise and draw attention to is this. The government of Nigeria, the state governments have a policy, as we are told, of no payment of ransom. Why? The belief is that paying ransom will encourage, will enhance, will empower the terrorists to acquire weapons. And they do not want that. But what the government doesn't want to do, the parents of the pupils that have been abducted were free-willing because of the life of their children. They have been paying. Now, in this case, how do we reconcile non-payment by government with payment by parents? In which case, what you do not want officially done is paid for. In other words, how can the federal government prevent the use of the ransom for acquiring new weapons? So in this case, we really need to sit down and address the factor of seriousness of purpose. Is our government really interested in truly fighting insecurity of the land? Now, when you look at the NDA, Nigerian Defense Academy, what dawns on me is what obtains in Afghanistan. When the Mujahideens, the Taliban, started, they started on a small scale, but expanding, acquiring more territories, and so on and so forth. This is what is happening in Nigeria. The kidnappers, the terrorists, started on a small scale. They kidnap individuals. They abduct school children and so on and so forth. But they have now extended their, their power of abduction to the elite institutions. Meaning now that as they are expanding, covering larger territories in Nigeria, we may end up having an Afghanization of Nigeria if care is not taken.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen, but certainly there are lessons we can learn from what is going on in Afghanistan. Very quickly, Professor Anthony Kila, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think when we put text into context, some things become clearer, other things become scary. When Yemi Adelokun reminded us that this is not the first time that the ND has been attacked or breached, it tells us that we've been walking in our sleep, or we've been sleeping in our walk. I don't know which is the appropriate one.
Or we've been sleepwalking.
Or we've been sleepwalking, quite simply, and it's a high level of unseriousness. She's very right about that. But I also think, though, that, however bad the situation is, because it is not gods or devils that are coming to charm us into this problem, it is man-made, but capable and willing human beings need to sit together and think of how to get out of the situation. My view is that one of the first things we need to do is to call this act of terrorism. There is a semantic implication of considering them terrorism rather than just criminal acts, because there are ways to deal with them. And I'm not just saying this. I'm saying it because it's logical, but also because it has been done in history. In Italy, some decades ago, part of what the government did was to create a law. I think it's 289B, it's Article 289B of the Criminal Code. When they actually decided that kidnapping and some form of crime, including organized crime, shall be equiparated with acts of terrorism. By doing that, the implication is that the attitude of the government towards these crimes will then change severely, and it will enable the armed forces to treat them as people who are at war with the country. And that will have a lot of consequences. And I think it's very important we start thinking that way. I also think that we need to remember that the case of ransom, let me say that I personally, I am for the fact that the state cannot be seen to be paying ransom. The state must at all points say ransom should not be paid. And it is good that the Nigerian state is saying so. What is missing is the Nigerian state is not winning the other side of the war. They are not arresting terrorists, criminals, and bandits. Those ones are having a field day. They're abducting and they are releasing at will. That is a dangerous thing. The attack on the NDA, it must be said, it is a functional and very symbolic act. So far, when they were abducting little children, we said they were cowards taking the vulnerable. Now they're showing us that they can take on not just the vulnerables, but also the very well-armed. And that is a sign of a failed or failing state. What they are saying is they're stronger than the government. It is important that people should realize that the attack on NDA happened just days after the government said they were making progress. This is a slap on the face of everybody to show them that, no, they're not making progress. I say this, I don't know if loyal or not, loyal citizens. I say this as a rational human being, so that the government can realize that somebody is saying to them, we are stronger than you. It is my hope that the government and all those charged with taking care of our lives and property stand up to the occasion.
Well, even retired military officers say they are thoroughly embarrassed that we will have this kind of development at this point in Nigeria. But let's take a breather at this point. You're still watching Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show, here on Arise News. When we return, the conversation will continue. Welcome back to Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show, here on the Arise News channel. Still with me in the studio, I have Professor Bola Akintanewa, Director General, Bolitag Center for International Diplomacy and Strategic Studies; Chike Ogea, former Commissioner for Information, Delta State; Professor Anthony Kila, International Director of Studies at the European Center of Advanced and Professional Studies; and Yemi Adamolekun, Executive Director, Enough is Enough. Now, to our next topic. The People's Democratic Party is Nigeria's main opposition political party. In the past few months, the party has been enmeshed in an internal crisis, with a section of the party insisting that its chairman, Prince Uche Secondus, should resign his position. The agitation found its way to the court, while a court in Rivers State, south of Nigeria, ordered Secondus to stop acting in the capacity of the chairman. Another court in Kebbi State, north central Nigeria, ruled that the embattled chairman should continue in office. Later, he obeyed an interim court order and stepped aside as the chairman. But the latest development, of course, is that another court in Cross River State, another court in Cross River State, yes, has ordered that, again, he should stop parading himself, as chairman. And, the chairman, is acting chairman at the moment, is the deputy chairman South, Chief Akinwumi Eda Akinwumi, who is the person who chaired the meeting of the national body of the party, and which has now fixed October 30 and October 31 as the date for the convention of the party. And by September 7, the party is going to announce the chair of the convention committee and also other persons who would oversee that. But in the papers today, Prince Uche Secondus is reported in some of the papers as saying that he remains in office. So you get a lot of contradictions. So is it over? Is Prince Uche Secondus trying to deal with something that has already been classified within the party as a finished matter? Or there are still other expectations? Well, the person who is closest to politics here is Chike, so I start with him.
Yeah, and it's not just politics, Ruben. It's this puts me right in the middle of two things. One is, yes, and not just politics, like I said, the PDP in this case. That is the only party I've ever been in my life. That's number one. Then number two, as a professional, I'm a lawyer, I'm a legal practitioner or a solicitor. And, it brings me to what people are saying about politicians in Nigeria. They ask a question. Is there nothing that the Nigerian politician will not destroy? That is the question. Because what I'm seeing is an assault on the judiciary. And I think the judiciary itself should be man enough to stand up, either by way of practice directions issued by the Chief Justice, or whatever, the NBA can also lead the charge in this. They have a new dynamic, youthful leadership in there. That courts of concurrent jurisdictions cannot go ahead and keep giving conflicting orders, and you are now telling me that you want to obey the one that was given the latest in time? Is that, you are a lawyer, a very, very intelligent solicitor, my brother. Why should a court in Yobe overrule a court in Anambra, or a court in Cross River overrule a court in Lagos? And they are all both high courts. I don't understand. If this matter is so important to the politicians, why don't they go on the appellate process? Why don't they go to the Court of Appeal, where maybe they will be told the truth, and they might not be able to procure those judges that they get that gives all these kind of orders all over the place, ridiculing the judiciary? It is becoming very, very frustrating. And I think something should really be done about this by the judiciary. This is not even the problem of these politicians. And if you notice, they do this when the elections are coming. That is when they start ridiculing the judiciary this way. I'm so upset about this that, I don't even want to comment on it. Thank you.
Well, the judges abuse ex parte applications, and this has been an old issue about the abuse of ex parte applications. And then the politicians are also guilty. They engage in forum shopping. But I think that, beyond forum shopping and abuse of court processes, the bigger issue will also be about the integrity of the political party system. Professor Anthony Killard, do you think that that is an issue?
I think it's a major. I think it's a major issue. There are two sides to it. The judicial aspect has been very well said with indignation by Chike Ogier. Really, somebody needs to stand up and ask a simple question. Has this case been put forward in any other similar court before we proceed? That's the simple thing that can be done and should be done. But I'm worried by the political implication. So political parties is part of the social, is part of the society that will produce leaders through the ballot box. And these people have no care, no consideration for their party. They have no care for how it will appear. We're talking about the PDP today, but this is actually an indictment of the whole political class, because let's not forget that it was the APC yesterday. They had the same issue with their chairman, and they had factions. So this group of people that are less than 1,000, that are less than 200, when they get together in the leadership working committee and where the chairman meet, they cannot agree between themselves. They have to go to court. They do not have the care and consideration for the image of the party. They have no care and consideration for the democracy. They have no care and consideration of what younger people are saying about them, and they drag themselves. This is a show of shame, and those who are involved, from politicians to the judiciary, should be ashamed of themselves that they are bringing this kind of show of a disgrace to their positions as political leaders. And I want to tell people to take a second thought. When they give so much reverence and respect to politicians, most of these people do not deserve it. Maybe because of the money they have in their pocket or the power they wield. But in terms of their integrity, in terms of their gravitas, and in terms of their public posture, they do not deserve too much of the respect we're giving them.
Well, Yemi Adamalekun, what do you think? Hello, Yemi. Are you still there with us? Oh, okay. Well, Prof, let me come to you while we're waiting to reconnect with Yemi Adamalekun.
I want to believe that there's no big deal in having 3 different courts ruling on the same issue. Because you see, in Nigeria, there is nothing like an intra-party democracy. And because there is none, our own democracy, the way it is practiced, is always tainted with dictatorship. So you have leaders that always unilaterally take decisions for others. And that is why people must always complain. And if you go to one court, and you know quite well that the court, because of institutional corruption, can be biased. That is why they rush elsewhere. If you now say, you complain that why should an individual want to act on the basis of the latest court judgment? Look, the principle of lex posteriori, deroga lex anteriori, the latest, the newest, like in the military, obey the last order. The latest judgment necessarily will override, you know, an earlier something.
Please don't go too far. The learned point that he was making is this, that a court of coordinate jurisdiction cannot act as an appellate court over another court that shares the same jurisdiction with it.
That is why
you can't twist that principle.
No,
it's casting gold.
No, hold on. You see, this is why there is distinction between a federal high court and a state high court.
Yeah.
All right? While the state high court has its jurisprudential powers there, and that you can now say a court, a federal high court, for instance, has competence all over Nigeria.
But all the courts involved in this matter are state high courts.
No,
those are the facts. That's the fact before us.
No, you see, the point I'm trying to make is simply that, look, if PDP is having a problem, it is simply because of the institutional corruption that has come to characterize politics in Nigeria. At all. The politics corrupt.
They should preserve the judiciary. That's all I am saying.
The judiciary should protect itself by not...
Then let them use it appropriately. Not using courts of coordinate jurisdiction against each other and causing confusion.
Look, you see, Shike, you made a good point. The first court decided on what date? Now, chronologically, you have another court making a decision. Why is the new court looking at the issue, not referring to what had been decided before? That's not a precedent.
Anyway, Prof, let me bring Yemi in. Don't let us argue about jurisdiction of or the hierarchy of courts. Yemi Adamolekun, yes, your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think the key word that when we talk about these judgments is the word procure. You shouldn't be procuring a judgment. So the simple fact that we use that word to define how politicians get judgments says all that it is that needs to be said. And I think in this case, even though both the politicians and the judiciary are guilty, I think the biggest share of the guilt with the judiciary. Because, I mean, Anambra is also a classic case. We're talking about chairmanship for the PDP. In Anambra court, for the governorship elections, judgments have been procured in, and this is Anambra governorship election. Judgments have been procured in Anambra, in Cross River, in Bauchi, in Jigawa. I mean, so if lawyers or the judiciary as an institution cannot speak to themselves and get some sense that this thing that you people are doing is, I mean, before we know it, I don't even know, as someone said, you will just have a judiciary where it's just like I don't even know how to describe where we are going. And then Dr. Abati, interestingly, and Mr. Ogier, both of you are doctors, or are lawyers rather. There's a word learned that's used for lawyers. I don't see anything learned about this kind of behavior. I mean, I don't understand how people will come to you and running for governor in Anambra and come to you in Jigawa. And you will sit and not tell the person, are you mad? Why are you in my court? Get out of my court. But no, lawyers are being paid, judge is being settled because that's what procurement means, obviously. Politician is do or die because of what he's going to get as the candidate of whatever party he is running for. We don't see, again, back to what I said earlier, we're not serious. When we're serious to change the narrative of Nigeria, we will do what we know to do, what is right to do, rather. So I really don't care about PDP and their chairmanship. It's a more larger problem. That's the comic I saw earlier today. So it's actually beyond PDP. I agree with Professor Kiterewa on that. It's not about this chairmanship. It's the way that the judiciary continues to allow itself to be used for this kind of nonsense. And then we complain. It doesn't make any sense. Anybody that does that judge in Jigawa or Bauchi, I've left PDP Secondus's matter now. This Anambra one is actually quite annoying. Those judges in Jigawa or Bauchi, someone should write them up to the National Judicial Council and say, these people are a disgrace to the profession. How can you be giving judgments in Anambra governorship election? What concerns Jigawa with Anambra?
Well, so Prof, we're back to the point that was being made that it's an abuse of court process. It's a stain on the integrity of the judiciary. If politicians can do forum shopping and buy injunctions, and then of course the implications for the integrity of the overall democratic process in Nigeria. Chike, what do you think? This looks like a nice cartoon.
This really makes my heart bleed because don't forget we are talking about the only profession I have here. I actually went to school to study this, and like Yemi said, we are supposed to be learned people, and it's just a pity that they are bringing the profession to such low levels, and it's very worrying and it's frightening. Like I said, it looks like we are ready to destroy every institution in this country because the judiciary is supposed to be the last, don't forget, the last bastion for everybody, the big, the vulnerable, the weak, everyone. That's supposed to be your last bus stop for justice. And if we get to a stage where it's now a bole kaje or it's a last man that comes for forum shopping, that is coming to buy what are you selling? Then
be careful.
You can know what I'm saying.
As an officer in the Temple of Justice, you are not expected to ridicule their lordships.
Okay, so their lordships,
if the judex themselves expose themselves to ridicule, what do you do? And that's the point that this cartoonist is making. So over to you, Professor Kila.
I think quite seriously, the judiciary itself needs to stand up for itself. I think there needs to be a kind of ethical review, and there should be some new, maybe not newly found, but newly rediscovered and enforced ethical rules for the judiciary, in which the bench and the bar needs to get together to safeguard the robe and realize that each time anybody does something ridiculous, that person should be called out. And together, the dignity and the profile of the judiciary will be safe. A safety that is necessary not only for the profession, but for all of us as citizens and for our democratic institutions. Well, and it's something that should be taken very seriously.
But as it were, what we're told is that the judges are expected to be above board, like Caesar's wife, and to deliver justice without fear or, favor. And that's why the lady with the scales is blindfolded. Well, we hope that, we'll not be talking about the integrity of the judiciary as another major episode as we continue to prepare for the 2023 elections. But then political parties must put their houses in order, whether it's the PDP or the APC or any other political party at all, because the political party system is at the heart of the democracy itself. Well, let's move on. Our final topic of the day. Afghanistan has been in the news for some time now, and from the look of things, it will remain a point of concern in global politics and international relations. Just on Saturday, that is yesterday, the American president, Joe Biden, warned that another terrorist attack in Kabul, the capital city of Afghanistan, was highly likely in the next 24 to 36 hours. There's also palpable fear among people eligible to return to the United Kingdom from Afghanistan as the British evacuation from Kabul draws to a close and the Taliban government making moves to seal off the major airport in that country. Professor Akintenuwa, latest developments in Afghanistan, the emergence of ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan, and the havoc that that body has inflicted on the people, and also how the U.S. and its allies have been humiliated. What next in Afghanistan?
What next in Afghanistan? At the domestic level of Afghanistan's politics, we are likely to witness an anti-Taliban uprising. It's not simply the ISIS-K. We have the Northern Alliance. We have the Al-Qaeda. All of them are struggling for political control of the country, which means that as we now have the Taliban government there now, the new opposition, as we predicted the other time, will be fighting the Taliban. At the international level, because the ISIS-K has gone to the extent to give a bad name to the good political will of the United States and its allies in trying to do good, to restore peace, to bring about security in that country. And for them now to have come up with bombings of 13 service men, killing about almost 200 people, and wounding, no, honestly, it is brutalization of all the efforts to keep Afghanistan safe. I think that internationally speaking, we are most likely to witness a reorganization of alliance of the allies to respond to the bombing in Afghanistan. More significantly, you know quite well that France has made it clear that, okay, it's no longer prepared to contribute to the issue for fear that they do not want any French soldier to be killed. What is going to happen this time is that despite the Taliban's pledge not to allow the use of Afghan territory for the spread of terrorism, the Taliban government is not going to be in control simply because of the struggling other militants that are fighting it. The Taliban wouldn't have control. Meaning now that internationally speaking, efforts will be made to coordinate new terrorists in Afghanistan. Above all, what we are most likely to witness is that as they are being chased out of Afghanistan, the terrorists are most likely to come to Africa. And Nigeria is most likely to be their first choice too, because of the entente cordiale that exists between Boko Haram and the Al-Qaeda.
We have just about a minute to go. I don't know, very quickly, Professor Kila, if you'd like to also comment on this.
Well, I just hope the last bit that Professor Akintarewa said does not come true. That's very scary. The West has lost the war in Afghanistan, and these are the consequences of losing the war.
Okay, well,
in the situation of Afghanistan, you know, like I said, this is something that had been mismanaged ab initio, and of course, the repercussions is what we are all seeing today. And if it's going to be another Syria type of different militias battling for control, and then, of course, the spread of extremism again, then, of course, the world is in for another new challenge, because they're going to start exporting it all over the world. They will use it as a breed, you know, a camp for breeding terrorism that will be expected all over the world. So I think NATO and the US, of course, making sure it takes its role as the policeman of the free world, should go into, you know, look at this Afghanistan case and make sure everything is diffused there.
Well, I mean, the IMF has suspended Afghanistan's drawing rights. The World Bank has also blacklisted the Taliban in Afghanistan. The United States government has also more or less frozen the assets of Afghanistan, about $9 billion in the US. I guess that what is even more important, in my view, is the humanitarian crisis that you know, Afghanistan faces. The WHO has organized to help the people of Afghanistan. I think whatever kind of response we have from the international community, the interests of the ordinary people who are suffering in Afghanistan should come first. Yemi Adamolekun, the last word on this.
I think you've summarized it well. Ultimately, but no, I mean, the interest is also quite tricky because, for example, there's a gentleman who escaped, who was on a surveillance list, but found himself in the UK, was able to get on the flight. Now, when he gets to the UK, now he's probably going to claim human rights so they don't send him back. So you then have people who are exporting their brand of terrorism who then become a risk, real risk in the countries where they might be taken as refugees. And that's something we shouldn't lose sight of. But then locally in Nigeria, the lessons from Afghanistan, for me, not just post the Taliban takeover, but what that means for Nigeria if we are not careful. And I hope it's beyond analyzing what's happening in Afghanistan, but also looking inward to where we might become in danger. Let me put it that way.
Well, thank you very much, Yemi Adamolekun, Professor Akintarewa Chikeogia, and Professor Anthony Kila. Thank you for watching. You've been watching Thisday Live, the Sunday talk show here on Arise News. I'm Ruben Abati. From my entire team here in Lagos, it's bye for now, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.